Hello, class. So today we're going to be studying the areas of Mexico and Peru, where we have examples of pre-Columbian art in the Americas. And here we're looking at a map of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, and we see it's separated into two sections. The purple section represents the Aztec Empire, and this green section over here represents the Mayan zone of influence. And these are some of the artistic achievements and architectural accomplishments of these cultures and civilizations that we will be looking into. A few things that I want to stress throughout this module would be art as a form of communication, the intersections between art and ritual, and the continuity between cultures. This is going to help us to understand pre-Columbian art, not only for the aesthetic qualities, but also for the various roles that were played in Mesoamerican, Caribbean, and Andean societies. We'll be also looking at the iconographical and stylistic interconnectedness of various pre-Columbian objects and artifacts. So you guys should have a better sense of how different cultures interacted and borrowed with each other. And I want to make note too that the 1300 CE is an artificial cutoff date. So there are some of these cultures that span from later in like the year 1440, 1470, a little bit further out. But we kind of use this as an opportunity to discuss the majority of these pre-Columbian cultures. And the Aztecs, the studies of that go from the years 1325 to 1521, and the Incas go from 1438 to 1534. So we'll add those in as well. So it's kind of a loose description to call it pre-Columbian. So let's get started. Here we have the colossal head. It comes from the Olmec culture, which was one of the oldest and earliest pre-Columbian civilizations in Mesoamerica. It was termed the mother culture of Mexico by this famed Mexican intellectual named Miguel Covarrubias, but scholars have since revised this theory because they've found all these other cultures located in the valley of Oaxaca from around the same time. Still, the Olmec made tremendous architectural complexes and monumental sculptures that have really drawn the attention of archaeologists and historians for the last century. One of the most impressive is the corpus of the Olmec visual culture, here found in the colossal heads. They're made out of basalt, which was removed by the nearby Tuxtla Mountains. Many of them are around 9 feet high and weigh about 28 tons. They're considered to look really naturalistic. So they're somewhere between abstract and pretty naturalistic. The expressions vary. Some of them are very placid faces. Some of them have this kind of turned in face with crossed eyes. Some historians interpret that as a signifier that they were in a trance-like state, suggesting that these individuals might have been participating in these hallucinogenic rituals where you put yourself into a supernatural realm. And this is considered a possibility because that's a practice that was pretty common with a number of these pre-Columbian civilizations. So these heads are also believed to depict rulers, and they were often recarved after that ruler dies. And that serves as like a marker for their death, but it was also an ability for the Olmec artists to recycle these really heavy basalt boulders because that transportation from the Tuxtla Mountains would require a ton of manpower, and they didn't even have wheels. So it wouldn't be uncommon or sacrificial for them to kind of deface these Olmec heads and start anew with a new ruler. And what we're looking at here is a map of Teotihuacan. It was located about 30 miles northeast of what is today Mexico City, and it was considered one of the first urbanized centers or cities in all of the Americas. The population was around 125,000. The inhabitants were at the height of the rule in around the year 600 CE. And think about what we already know about the world during the year 600 CE. China, India, Europe, they were all starting to kind of blend their cultures. So in Japan, we were starting to get Mahayana Buddhism. So you're getting iconic Buddhas being influenced in Japan from India. The Elephanta caves were being built in India. That's the same time that they were starting to build, or it's really close to the same time that they're about to commission and build the Dome of the Rock for Islam. And Rome was recently had fallen in the West. So at this same time in our world, just 30 miles of what is today Mexico City is this first city in all the Americas. It's pretty amazing. So what we have here is the most prominent feature of Teotihuacan's building environment, and this is the Pyramid of the Sun. And it was constructed early in about year 150 to 225. These colossal pyramids were built on top of sacred caves that were probably intended to honor one of Teotihuacan's rulers. The pyramid was constructed using this talud tablero technique. So that consists of a sloped talud. So you can see there's a sloped part and then there's a horizontal part. Vertical part. So the vertical part is the tablero and the slope part is the talud. And when used together, they create this kind of step look. So these kind of almost look like stairs. And then this architectural signature becomes really popular throughout Mesoamerica. And that can be found among the Mayan pyramids as well. Yeah, so just try to imagine this at its peak in the year 600 with about 2,000 apartment complexes placed on a grid system, all kind of centrally located around this Pyramid of the Sun. And what you don't see in those far away pictures are these up close details. These kind of stone figures, part of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. And this is meant to symbolize the dual nature of the deity that's likely being honored here. The serpent represents the ability to be able to crawl on the earth, and the feathered animal is able to fly through the air. So it kind of speaks to the power and the might of this ruler. So next in this very brief survey, we'll move on to a quick study of a piece of artwork that came out of the Mayan region. Here's just an example of some of that recreation of that pyramid form that we saw in Teotihuacan. And this is the shield jaguar and lady hawk from Yaxchitlan, Mexico. It's made from limestone. This is a lintel. It's one of the stone relief carvings that depicts shield jaguar, which is one of Yaxchitlan a king who ruled from the year 681 to 742 CE. And he's standing in profile with a torch in his hand while his wife, Lady Hogue, kneels before him. She's engaging in a common form of elite bloodletting. So she's passing this obsidian laced rope through her tongue, and the droplets of blood are collected in a small container filled with paper. In a subsequent lintel, there's a stylized serpent like cloud coming from the container, representing the burning paper. And the paper served as a conduit for converting sacrificial blood into smoke. And that smoke is a substance that, as this lintel demonstrates, can hold a transformative and otherworldly kind of property. So the shield jaguar is positioned directly in the maw of this kind of otherworldly serpent smoke plume, and it's pointing a spear directly at this frightened looking lady hoke. These glyphs lining the edges of the perimeter of the relief carving identify the subject matter and the date of each lintel. And these images were originally positioned above the southeast doorway of the site's main temples. Archaeologists have interpreted this lintel as a glorification of Lady Hoke's political capabilities, given her decision to have herself represented as a key facilitator to Shield Jaguar's transformation. So these lintels serve as the first documented instance of female artistic patronage in the ancient Americas. So now we'll move on to Tula, Mexico, the capital of the Toltecs and the Toltec culture. It was greatly admired by the Aztec civilization, who frequently emulated its artistic and architectural style. It also marked the site where the famous Aztec god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was thought to reside. So the site's colossal Atlantids are architectural supports that originally held up the roof of a temple. They're humans that are in the midst of transforming into something animal. We can see them up close here. The stiff, dignified figures wear feather headdresses and butterfly pectorals. Their status as warriors is further demonstrated by the atlatls, spear throwers, that they hold in their hands. The blocky, stiff Toltec sculptural style eventually gave way to a more fluid, naturalistic stone carving technique that was developed by the Aztecs. So across the Gulf of Mexico in the Caribbean, the Taino civilization spread its sphere of influence across the islands of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. The Taino region consisted of a series of chiefdoms led by a cacique. The Taino people are perhaps known for their famous encounter with Christopher Columbus in 1492. One of the most important genres of material culture among the Taino people are zemis, usually made from stone or wood. Zemis represent gods and ancestors and were often associated with rituals involving inhalation of cohoba and other hallucinogenic substances. While the Taino civilization was almost completely wiped out by the 16th century due to warfare and disease brought by the Spanish conquest, the Taino culture retains a lingering presence in the Spanish language. For instance, words like barbacoa would be barbecue, or canoa, which would be canoe, and tabaco, which is tobacco. So all indigenous words that were absorbed into Spanish vocabulary. Scientists have recently discovered that 60% or more of modern Puerto Ricans also have this indigenous mitochondrial DNA. Okay, and before we move on to the pre-Columbian Andes, I'm going to pause here so I can start up the next set of a 15-minute intake. So go ahead and close this one and move on to the next video.